Jordan became the second country to sign a peace agreement with Israel in 1994 after Egypt. Yet at the Negev Forum at the beginning of this year, Jordan was notably absent. And where do you see Jordan in the Middle East peace process at the moment?
Thank you so much. I mean, Jordan will remain where it has always been, trying extremely hard to find a political solution to a conflict that is the main root of conflict and tension in the region. We remain engaged in every effort possible to change the extremely dangerous path on which the conflict is going right now, produce political horizons and get the parties back to the table to agree on a solution that will end this conflict. And the only way to do that is the two-state solution, which is being compromised day in, day out by Israeli measures that are creating facts on the ground that is making it impossible. We do believe, obviously, in the importance of regional economic cooperation, but as my dear friend has just said, this can never be an alternative to a political solution. It can, yes, contribute to creating an environment conducive to better sort of atmosphere when the parties get together, but it cannot be an alternative. Right now, we're at an extremely dangerous moment. The threat of things deteriorating further is very, very credible. People are losing hope. The faith in the peace process, which has not really been there for years now, has completely almost eroded, and the Palestinians are being pushed towards a position of having nothing left to lose. So I think right now the important thing is to see how we can prevent further falling into the abyss of violence and conflict. And to do that, some serious measures will have to be taken. Last week, as you saw, Israel announced massive settlement activities expansion, about 9,400 units on the occupied West Bank, in addition to legalize what Israel itself used to call the illegal outpost. That is pretty much killing the two-state solution. That is telling the Palestinians, in the absence of any political horizon, in the midst of mounting security and economic pressures, incursions into Palestinian territories, that is sending a message to the Palestinian people that you have no future. And that's why we've been working extremely hard in the past few days in particular. Tremendous amount of effort has been exerted by all parties to try and see a way out of this looming threat of eruption of wide-scale violence, stop unilateral measures that are undermining the two-state solution, create a period of calm that would allow us to kind of pick the pieces and put us back on a track towards re-engagement, which is the only way out. Security approach alone, which has been the approach used, is not going to do it. How? I think we see where we are now. So you need political engagement, you need security engagement, you need economic engagement, but none of them is going to produce the calm and put us back on a path of hope, except for real political horizons that would get the parties back to the table for a real conversation on what needs to be done. And Jordan's, as you mentioned, we've signed a peace treaty over 27 years ago. So when we speak, I believe we speak with the credibility of a peacemaker that wants to see peace achieved. And I think, having been at the heart of this conflict, we also know what it takes to get us to that peace. And what would take us to that peace is earnest, serious movement towards resuming negotiations, while at the same time stopping all unilateral measures that are simply making that solution impossible. And to what my dear friend Aniken has just said, the one state will not be a solution. The one state will be an extremely ugly reality where you're going to be seeing apartheid taking deeper roots, and that's not a recipe for peace. That's a recipe for further conflict. The two-state solution, allowing a Palestinian state, sovereign, independent, in accordance with international law, Arab Peace Initiative, living side by side Israel in peace, is the only way forward. We're not naive. We know that this is an extremely, extremely dangerous moment, and something needs to happen, and needs to happen quickly, before we wake up and find ourselves in the midst of a wide-scale eruption of violence. And Ramadan is around the corner. It's going to coincide this year again with the Passover and with Easter. And if we get to it with this kind of very explosive environment, then we're going to be looking at a major, major challenge to all of us.
Ayman الصفدي.
Thank you. When the conflict in Ukraine first started, I mean, a lot of countries started talking to us about where will Jordan stand. And we said we will stand where we always stood, in support of international law, UN Charter, the unacceptability of acquisition of land by force. We have an occupation next door. So it was a matter of principle for us that we would urge an end to this war and urge respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. Because if we did not do that, we'll be hypocrites, urging an international stand against an occupation next door and not standing against what we saw happening in Ukraine and Russia. So I think that's a question that is being raised all over the world. And unfortunately, part of the real politics that we see is that we keep moving from one issue to the other as if other problems have changed or have ended. They did not. I mean, in the past few years, the Palestinian issue has been off the international agenda. It is back on the agenda when there is the threat of violence, and there's the threat of the eruption of violence that everybody starts talking about. And this is something that we've been constantly warning against. We've got to be able to find a path forward to solving this most, oldest and most important of conflicts in the region. And now, as I said earlier, and as my colleague from Palestine and from Norway have said, and Bahrain, we are at a very critical moment right now. We're really facing a moment where the Palestinian people have lost hope, have lost faith in the peace process, they're taking things into their own hands, and they see no political horizon. So we've got to bring that political horizon, and that political horizon can only be the product of an acknowledgement that the Palestinians have rights, and those rights have to be met, and those rights are not just economic, they're also political, because trying to present the conflict as an economic conflict is only making it worse, and then get back to the table to move towards the two-state solution, which again is being compromised day in, day out. That's number one. Number two, I think the assumption that you could jump over the Palestinians to have lasting and comprehensive peace in the region is an illusion. Because we saw it a couple of years ago when violence erupted in Jerusalem, the whole world went back to talking about the Palestinian conflict. And how could we, in full honesty, be talking about, imagine we're us sitting in a meeting, all of us talking about economic projects, and there's killing on the streets of the West Bank and Jerusalem. It just does not work in that way. And I think we all need to remember that it is not because of the absence of peace treaties between Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, Emirates, and others that we had a conflict. It's because we had a conflict that we did not have peace treaties. So all those treaties, if they do not contribute to solving the essential cause of conflict, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, then the conflict will continue and it will get worse, and its repercussions will affect all of us. So I think we need to remain cognizant of the fact that the main issue here is the Palestinian issue. And if we're talking regional integration, from a practical and from a political perspective, if you do not bring the Palestinians in, then what kind of situation are you creating? Are you sending a message to the Palestinians that we've forgotten about you, you don't count anymore, you don't matter anymore, and you're left on your own, deal with it? So we have to, again, be careful that we have a balance in our approach, that our messaging does address the real issues on the table. And again, let's remember, it is a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We cannot we all want peace. And by the way, I mean, nobody's doing anybody a favor by opting for peace. All our peoples deserve to live in peace and dignity, and to have an opportunity and to create jobs and to tackle environmental and other issues. But our ability to do so will remain, not sufficient unless we're able to create conditions of peace where everybody comes together and we pool our resources and we address those growing and enormous changes. So now, again, if not the two-state solution, then what? How does Israel see the future in 5-10 years from now? If we continue with those settlements, continue with those actions. Excuse me, I just want to respond to that very, very quickly. Yes. I mean, look, we can go into our different narratives over the history of the conflict, and I don't think our narratives will ever be reconciled. But I think what we should agree on is that we want a better future in which the political rights of all peoples in the region are fulfilled. And I think if the point of departure is where we started from, we'll never get anywhere. I think the point of departure should be where do we want to get to? And that is the thing. Number two, yes, Palestinians are victims. And that's the truth of the fact. They're a victim of occupation that has persisted for decades. Now they're the victims of the absence of any effort to address their legitimate concerns as recognized by the international community, by human rights, by everything else. We can go into Gaza, but we will need 2 hours probably to discuss that. But Gaza is an open prison as well, and we need to ask the question of why did Gaza get where it is right now, and that's a different story. But what I would say is that Palestinians are ready to sit on the table right now and start negotiations. It's not the Palestinians who are saying we don't want to sit on the table right now. Will the Israeli government come to the table? That's what we've been trying to do. In Jordan, we've been exerting tremendous efforts in cooperation with the US, with the coordination with Europe, with the Palestinian Authority, with Arab countries, to try and get a round table in which negotiations, serious, meaningful negotiations start. So to the question of the former Prime Minister, yes, the Palestinians already have been calling, have been urging for a resumption of a peace process that has been practically dead for years now. So I think let's focus on where are we now? We are at a horrific moment in terms of changes that are just destroying the hope for peace. Where do we want to go? We want to go to a solution based on the two-state solution. The path to that is let the parties sit on the table in accordance with terms of reference that have been agreed. So yes, the Palestinians are ready to engage, but will the Israeli government engage in negotiations? And that has been the effort that has been ongoing by many of us to try and get that negotiation started, restore hope, and give people an alternative to despair, which is again threatening a moment of very difficult moment for all of us.
Safadi and Amadou, very briefly, if I may ask, because we've taken up our 15 minutes.
Thank you. Very, very briefly, just none of us want violence. Violence is not going to get us anywhere. Everybody's going to suffer, and it's just going to get worse. The problem that we had that in the past, the only approach to tackling this was security. And we got into the cycle of action-reaction, which is not getting us anywhere. So we've got to look again, I echo what my friend said, we've got to look at the root causes, work together to make sure that we create hope, create horizons, and move away from this violence. That is at the core of what we're trying to do right now, to stop another vicious cycle of violence erupting as we move forward. The second thing, your question, I think tremendous amount of work is being done right now to recreate some sort of political engagement. Engagement for engagement's sake in politics is usually not objective, but I think in the absence of that engagement, it is extremely important to get the parties together so that we send a message to the people that something is happening and it's not over. So a lot of effort is being made to get a political engagement because, again, the only engagement that we had in the past was security, and that did not and will not solve the problem. So hopefully we'll be able to at least get the parties around the table. I'm not talking about a major breakthrough right now. That's a bit distant. But if we resume, sort of a degree of political contact, address the current challenges with a view to preparing the ground for a more comprehensive engagement that would address the conflict in its totality, I think will be moving forward.